The worn book in her hands told a story beyond its pages. Eleanor, Ellie Patterson, 67, clutched the old copy of Where the Wild Things Are against her chest as she sat in the second row of the Tonight Show studio. The book's spine was cracked from decades of eager little hands, its pages softened by countless readings and its corners rounded by love. For 45 years, this had been her favorite book to share with children, and tomorrow she would read it for the last time as head librarian of Riverside Public Library. Ellie had dedicated her entire adult life to the quiet magic of books and the children who discovered worlds within them. She'd started as a young library assistant in 1979, fresh out of college with a degree in literature and dreams of inspiring young minds. She was ending her career having touched the lives of 3 generations, children who had become parents who now brought their own children to Miss Ellie's story time. The Tonight Show tickets had been a surprise retirement gift from the library board and her colleagues. "You've spent 45 years entertaining children," the head of the board had said. "Now it's time for someone to entertain you." But Ellie felt strange being in an audience instead of in front of one. For decades, she'd been the one creating magic moments, the one bringing stories to life, the one making children believe in the power of imagination. What Ellie didn't know was that her story had reached far beyond the walls of Riverside Library. Over the years, the children she'd inspired had become teachers, authors, doctors, and parents who credited their love of reading to the gentle librarian who had made every story feel like an adventure. Some of those former children had contacted The Tonight Show, hoping to honor the woman who had shaped their lives in ways she never fully understood. It was a Wednesday night taping in November, and Jimmy was in excellent spirits. He'd just finished interviewing a popular author about her new children's book series, and the conversation had naturally turned to the importance of libraries and librarians in fostering young readers. The timing couldn't have been more perfect. During his usual commercial break interaction with the audience, Jimmy's attention was drawn to Ellie by the book she held so carefully. Something about the way she cradled it, like a mother holding a sleeping child, made him curious. "Man, I love seeing someone with a book," Jimmy called out. "What are you reading there?" Ellie looked up, startled to be noticed. She held up the worn copy of Maurice Sendak's classic. "Oh, this is Where the Wild Things Are. It was my favorite to read to the children." "Was." Jimmy caught the past tense immediately. "Are you a teacher?" "I'm a librarian. Well, I was a librarian. I retire tomorrow after 45 years. Her voice carried a mixture of pride and sadness. The way someone speaks about the end of an era. Jimmy felt drawn to learn more. He stepped closer to Ellie's section of the audience, his entertainer's instincts telling him there was something special about this woman. 45 years as a librarian, that's incredible. Tell me about it." Ellie's eyes lit up with the same enthusiasm she'd brought to every story time. "I worked at Riverside Public Library my whole career, started as assistant and worked my way up to head librarian, but my favorite part was always the children's programs, story time reading clubs, summer reading challenges. How many children do you think you've read to over 45 years? Ellie thought for a moment, a gentle smile crossing her face. "Oh my goodness, thousands and thousands. I used to do story time 3 times a week, plus special programs, school visits. I stopped counting after the first decade, but it had to be tens of thousands of children." A murmur went through the nearby audience members. The scope of her impact was staggering. An entire generation, maybe 2, influenced by one woman's dedication to literacy and imagination. What was it like watching children discover reading? "It was magic," Ellie said simply. "Pure magic. You'd see a child who was shy or struggling, and then you'd find the right book, the right story, and suddenly their whole world would open up. I've watched children who couldn't sit still for 5 minutes become completely absorbed in a story. I've seen kids who thought they didn't like reading discover they just hadn't found the right book yet." Jimmy was captivated by her passion. Even in retirement, talking about books and children made Ellie come alive. "You have a favorite memory from all those years?" Ellie's eyes grew misty. "Oh, there are so many. But I think my favorite memories are the children who came back as adults, sometimes with their own children. They'd say, 'Miss Ellie, do you remember me? You read to me when I was little, and now I want you to meet my daughter.' That's when you know you've really made a difference." Jimmy looked at the worn book in Ellie's hands, understanding now why she held it so carefully. "Is that book special to you?" "This particular copy? Oh, yes. I've read this exact book to probably 5,000 children over the years." It was published in 1963, and I got this copy in 1979 when I started at the library. Look at it. The binding is loose, the pages are soft, the colors are faded, but every mark, every worn spot represents a child who was transported to where the wild things are. The cameras, without being directed, began focusing on this unexpected moment. The audience around them grew quiet, sensing they were witnessing something profound. Jimmy made a decision that would transform the evening. Ellie, I think there are some people here who would love to hear you read from that book. Would you consider sharing a story with us? Ellie looked surprised. Oh, I don't know. I'm not used to reading to adults. Trust me, Jimmy said gently, stories don't have age limits, and something tells me you could make even the wildest things come alive for this audience. With encouragement from those around her, Ellie made her way to the stage. As she walked down the aisle, clutching her beloved book, the applause began, not the typical energetic television applause, but something warmer, more respectful, the kind of appreciation reserved for teachers and mentors. When Ellie reached the stage, Jimmy helped her up the steps and guided her to a comfortable chair he'd had the crew bring out. Ladies and gentlemen, Jimmy announced to the studio, this is Eleanor Patterson, Miss Ellie to thousands of children over 45 years. She's going to share something special with us. Ellie settled into the chair, opened the worn book, and suddenly she was transformed. The uncertainty of being on television faded away, replaced by the confidence and warmth she brought to countless story times. The night Max wore his wolf suit and made mischief of one kind and another, Ellie began, her voice taking on the storytelling cadence she'd perfected over decades. But this wasn't just a reading, it was a performance. Ellie used different voices for different characters, made sound effects with her mouth, and gestured with her free hand to bring the story to life. The studio audience, many of whom probably hadn't heard a story read aloud since they were children, was completely captivated. As Max sailed off to where the wild things are, Ellie's voice grew more animated. When she got to the famous line, "Let the wild rumpus start," she said it with such joy and enthusiasm that several audience members laughed and clapped. By the time Max returned home to find his supper still warm, there wasn't a person in the studio who wasn't completely under Ellie's spell. This was what 45 years of practice looked like. This was mastery in its purest form. When she closed the book, the silence lasted for a moment before the audience erupted in applause. But it wasn't just applause. People were on their feet, some wiping their eyes, all of them having been reminded of the power of a story well told. Jimmy sat down beside Ellie, visibly moved. Ellie, that was incredible. You just transported all of us back to childhood. Thank you. Stories have that power, they connect us to our younger selves, to our sense of wonder. Jimmy reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his business card. Ellie, I want you to have this, but first I want to tell you something that I think you need to hear. What's that? We reached out to some people before tonight's show. Do you remember a little girl named Sarah Chen who used to come to your story times about 20 years ago? Ellie's face lit up with recognition. Sarah! Oh my goodness, yes, she was so shy when she first started coming. Barely spoke above a whisper. Well, Sarah is now a best-selling children's author. She's written 12 books, and she wanted us to tell you something. She said you were the first person who made her believe that stories were magic and that magic was something she could create too. Ellie gasped, bringing her hand to her mouth. Sarah became a writer? She did, and she's not the only one. We heard from dozens of people whose lives you touched. Teachers who said you inspired them to work with children. Parents who said you taught them how to make reading special for their own kids. Even a pediatrician who said your story times helped him learn how to calm frightened children in the hospital. Jimmy stood and addressed the audience directly. This woman has spent 45 years proving that libraries aren't just buildings full of books, they're sanctuaries of imagination, creativity, and learning. Miss Ellie has been a guardian of childhood wonder for nearly half a century. The audience erupted again, understanding they were witnessing the recognition of a truly special educator. There's something else, Jimmy continued. The library board wanted to do something special for your retirement. So they've established the Eleanor Patterson Children's Reading Garden at Riverside Library. It's going to be a special outdoor space where story times can continue year round with your name on a plaque that reads, "In honor of Miss Ellie, who taught us that every child deserves a story." Ellie was openly crying now, overwhelmed by the recognition and the knowledge that her work would continue in a permanent way. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "You don't have to say anything," Jimmy replied. "You've been saying it for 45 years, one story at a time." As they helped Ellie back to her seat, she stopped and looked out at the audience one more time. "Thank you for listening to an old story," she said softly. "But remember, the best stories are the ones we keep telling, the ones we pass on to the next generation. Don't let the magic die." The episode that aired became one of the most beloved Tonight Show segments of the year. It sparked a national conversation about the importance of libraries and librarians in fostering literacy and imagination. Ellie's retirement party the following week was attended by hundreds of former patrons, from toddlers to grandparents, all wanting to thank the woman who had shaped their love of reading. The Eleanor Patterson Children's Reading Garden became a reality 6 months later, funded by donations from grateful families whose children had been touched by Miss Ellie's magic. Ellie continued volunteering at the library twice a week, leading story times in her new garden sanctuary. She discovered that retirement didn't mean the end of her calling. It meant the freedom to focus purely on the part she loved most, sharing stories with children who still believed in magic. 2 years later, Ellie published her own children's book, The Librarian Who Collected Stories, about a woman who discovers that the real treasure in any library isn't the books, it's the memories made when stories bring people together. At 69, she still reads to children every week, still believes in the transformative power of a good story, and still carries that worn copy of Where the Wild Things Are wherever she goes. Because sometimes the greatest adventures happen not in faraway lands, but in the corner of a library where a patient voice makes every story feel like the beginning of something wonderful. Sometimes the most important magic isn't found in fairy tales, it's found in the dedication of people like Miss Ellie, who spend their lives proving that every child deserves to discover the wild things that live in their own imagination.